Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Cora webinar. And with me on stage are three experts in their various fields in the fintech ecosystem, right? Today, we'll be talking around the topic of building and optimizing your financials for profits as a startup, right? Before we dive right in, I would like for my guests to introduce themselves and tell us about their experience in this space, possibly how they got into the space as fast as possible. So, with no particular order, we can start off with Ikechukwu Ngwize. Please go ahead and tell us about yourself.
All right, good evening, guys. My name is Nweze Ikechukwu. I'm a co-founder of Vent Africa, also a co-founder of Hizo Technology Limited. So I got into the space from getting into tech very early, from doing free browsing those days, in the days of Java phone, Symbian phone, from modifying websites in the days of Move.mobi, Wapka, to blogging, music blogging, entertainment blogging, um, working with my friends to build blogs for monetization purposes, which is making money from AdSense and the rest. And it evolved into when I came into crypto, and then from there, I started building a product, which I have some good products in the.
Nice to know. Thank you so much for sharing, IK, and welcome to the show as well. We move on to our next panelist on stage. Rina, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Ben. Can you hear me?
Yes, properly.
Okay, super. My name is Rena Osiemi. I'm managing director at ZQuest Wealth. Why am I in this space? I'm passionate about technology and investment. So just merging both of them, and also financial literacy. What we do at ZQuest Wealth essentially is drive financial literacy so people can take informed action. We are also a fully licensed investment management company. So essentially all of the advice that we give you, we're able to help you execute on that. But third, we also distribute all of this through technology. So it's very important. I think this is a very important conversation. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much as well for joining. And last but not the least on the stage is our doctor, our very own doctor, Dr. Stephen. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. And let me extend my formal greetings to my fellow speakers right here on this call, Rena and IK. Pleased to be having this conversation with the both of you on this call. So my name is Stephen. I'm the COO of Cora. My background, of course, has been in education and technology and finance. And over the years, I think I don't know how many years now, but I know that since 2011, I've been actively involved in the tech space. I had the privilege of founding Hebron Startup Lab, which is the first university-based startup accelerator at Covenant University, from which quite a couple of startups have emerged from. So that's been a platform, that's been known amongst other universities to be churning out entrepreneurs. So that's more like a brief background. Of course, operations, executing, getting things done, is part of the role. So that's just a brief.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. My name is Ben. Just to complete the formalities, I lead sales and partnerships at Cora, and I'm excited to be the host for today's discussion. This particular webinar targets a set of persons, right? Not everybody would probably benefit from this at the highest level, but we actually had early to mid-stage founders in mind when we put this one together. We also had operations officers also in mind, and then the financial officers, right, in fintech startups, right? So we put this together to be able to help or share ideas and experience around how to build and optimize your financials to become like a profitable startup. So if you're here, you're excited, you're welcome to join us on this journey as we proceed into the conversation. Okay, so let me start by posing the first question to Dr. Stephen and Rena, and then Ikechukwu will follow afterwards. So over the past few years, right, startup conversations have been centered around growth, and fundraising. But today, the conversation is seemingly shifting towards, profitability and sustainability. The questions that I would first of all want to ask are, what has actually changed, and what should founders be looking out towards adapting, right? So what should founders be looking out towards, in order to adapt in this new shift, for fundraising? Please let me start with Dr. Steven. What are the actual things that founders should be looking out for, and what exactly has changed?
Okay. I think first and foremost is to explore from how things should be. Okay, so what, I think I'm going to share my thoughts on how things should be, and of course also express how things had been. And of course, this conversation started like many years ago. I remember when the entire tech ecosystem commenced in Nigeria. I mean, we've had like a couple of things that have happened for that time. Looking at the historicals, we've had a couple of companies that we call tech companies, but the actual tech, kind of like started around like the 2010-ish. So we started to have like hubs around. We started to have, we had the CC hubs, courtesy of our current Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, that's Tijani. And also we had the likes of Kola, doing amazing stuff in Abuja through the just platform. We had pockets of things, happening, of which we had like some interesting things, happening at these platforms, from the Andelas, and the budgets, quite a number of things, happening in the various silos. Now, this, happened as a result of people who are really passionate about, causing transformation, leveraging technology. I think Shola building Paystack, I think that was 2015 was when he started. In fact, I remember the first company that he tested that payment platform on. So this growth happened, and then all of a sudden, 2020, there was like a huge exit for Paystack, $200 million US. Of course, that drew a lot of attraction. We had a couple of persons, coming into the picture, and then people started to leverage a lot of stories around how to raise money, which was a good stuff. But I think where the ecosystem, I won't say the ecosystem, maybe some persons saw this as an opportunity to turn startups into suitcases to get a lot of money from investors. So now the conversation now shifted from the fact of what setting up a business really is meant for to fundraising. Well, fundraising is good, and it's one of the means by which you want to build and grow a business. It's not the actual core, right? Smart investors definitely know, when they see a real entrepreneur who really wants to build something versus somebody who really wants to make money. So we had a lot of persons, who already know how to do the storytelling, put the story together, get the deck done, have something to practice together, and then let's have something to tell investors. And then because, this is the era where we're having, we started to have like lots of interesting things happening in Africa. We just had like Paystack, exit at $200 million US, and then, Flutterwave is growing, and then we were seeing, $1 billion valuation, we're seeing $2 billion valuation, we're seeing $3 billion valuation. I think Jumia even, IPO'd at New York Stock Exchange even at that time. So quite a lot of things you have. People are just trying to leverage and take advantage of that. But again, in the actual sense of it, let's come down to the basics, right? Simple economics tell us that the reward for entrepreneurship is profit. If you remember the factors of production, the reward for land is rent. The reward for labor is salaries and wages. The reward for capital is interest, and the reward for entrepreneurship is profit. Like, where did we get this whole picture wrong? That we started to pursue the wrong metric as to what growth really means, right? And that's why we find a lot of pursuits on fundraising. And I think investors are a lot smarter now, because now it's given an opportunity for us to see quite a number of things. But this is not to say that fundraising is wrong, and that's why I started by saying that it's nothing wrong about fundraising, right? But we need to get the formula right? We need to know exactly what we are raising funding for, right? If you have a plan and a clear path as to what you want to drive and achieve, you've achieved a couple of product market fit, or you want, some level of seed funding to at least try to achieve product market fit, and you've gotten that right. The next thing you can now begin to focus on is to max your startup phase, and then now grow the company. And when you get that right, you can now begin to scale the company. But now it's like people are raising funds to extend the runway. Like, when will that journey end? Like, when will it really end, for us to extend the runway? Like, basically gambling with the investors' money to extend the runway. So the focus, is now being channeled away from building and generating profits to basically spending investors' money to extend the runway. Investors are not interested in that. So I can see now, looking at the entire ecosystem, investors are a lot smarter now. Before, I think what got them all couched in was the fact that it was the fear of missing out, right? So these are my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for sharing. I picked a whole lot from that, but I know that Rina had something to add, so maybe I'll allow Rina to go first.
Right. Thank you, Doc, for when you said the reward for capital is interest. That's essentially what's the investors want, right? Interest or dividends or growth of their capital or their investment. And like you said, there's the startup founders who are raising capital or raising funds to increase or extend their runway, and then you had the investors also not wanting to miss out, and then sometimes just funding ideas. But the fundamental is you're running a business anyway, and you're in a business to make profit. And so one of the things that's why, as when our eyes cleared, essentially, because also Zcrest Capital has invested in over 40 startups across Africa. So it's something where we're also an investor in this, a very strong investor in this space, right? Now we're asking questions around what are the economics? Like, sometimes people just say, oh, we are growing, but what does growth look like, right? Can this business survive? Can the fundamentals of this business, because even if you say it's a technology business, you still have a business, you have customers. Is there demand? At what costs are you serving these customers? Can it generate cash? Can it scale without, at what point does it scale without depending on another fundraise or external funding? And that's it, like Doc said, it's not that you should not raise, it's not that it's a bad thing, but we need to change our mindsets, right? So when you say you've doubled your customers this quarter, then does every new customer cost you more than you generated? What's your cost of acquisition? Are you looking at the unit metrics, right? So one, you then need to become an accountant to understand all of the fundamentals of your business, right? Every additional customer should move you closer to profitability, because at some point your cost needs to come down while your revenue is increasing. At least that's where we are going. And that's not also cast in stone, because you still have perhaps expansion goals, right? Then what are you doing about cash? Because cash, even though you say you have cash, then are you checking your burn rates? How much cash do you have? What's your runway? Are you collecting, depending also on the sort of business that you run, are you collecting, and even are you sweating your free cash flow, right? So at the end of the day, what a lot of us were focused on was things around, oh, we've grown, but cash flow also keep the lights on, so it's all those tiny things, expenses, do you need to spend this much? Do you need to buy this tool now, right? There are some things that your Excel sheet to do, is a principle. You would probably need the tool maybe a few years from now, but can you work with Excel today? Can you do the fundamentals? So those sorts of things around cost, around cash, around units, economics are the things that we need to be looking at as founders.
Thank you so much, Rina. I'm going to come back to you, and this question I have for you would be around, since you have the experience as a VC. But before I get to that question, let me allow IK to react to the first question. IK, so tell us from your standpoint, the conversation is actually shifting towards, profitability and sustainability, as opposed to just raising a cash out, prior to now in the industry. What are your thoughts, and how should startups adapt in this case?
Okay, well, thank you, Ben, for the questions. And Doctor and Rena have already pointed out some key things about it. And I can tell you for a fact that from inception, when the growth or the rise in startups in Nigeria, it was more of ideas and trying to change the narrative, change what has existed, using the example of Paystack. And then when Paystack exited, a lot of persons were still um, coming into the space with similar idea. Everybody was doing it, was
I think
literally
Ikechukwu is frozen.
fintech. And now, so I think one of the reason or one of the major issues we are facing now is what I term abuse of startup capital, abuse of VC funding. Hope you guys can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you now.
Okay. So I term is abuse of startup capital, abuse of VC funding. You end up seeing startups who they don't know, because I believe as a business person or as a startup founder, you need to understand if this business is going to stand the test of time without external capital. So first of all, you need to understand, is this business profitable? Are you starting business and starting to chase revenue from the get-go? Because a lot of persons, they go into this business, they'll be like, okay, before the investors money run out of, or before we run out of investor, we'll start making money. So there's a lot of projections without proper metrics to back it up. So they end up earning a lot of money in marketing. There are some products I will not want to mention, like they want investors money, and we know clearly, people who are in the space know clearly that this is not sustainable. And so when one investor, two investors, three investors that have ended up giving startup money, and those startup end up closing because of the run out of cash, they file for bankruptcy, it became difficult. And now there's now a reset in the industry for everybody to go back to, you need to chase revenue first, you need to sell first. And a lot of, I think fintech, most of these startups, they started doing this whole over hiring. And that is why when push come to shove, you see them firing people, reducing, downsizing, because they sometimes they hire without proper calculation. So for myself, when I started my first startup, is a food delivery business, which is Olili Food, now Trazo. I was the accountant because my dad was a chartered accountant. It's not like I studied accounting in school. I studied computer science, but I used the experience of working with my dad to manage the books. And then it got to a stage where I knew I needed an accountant to come in and help me manage the books properly. That was when I was able to employ an accountant. And it took some years, took few years. But some of these startups, they just come in because there's investor funds with them. They just go and hire one of the best accountants, paying millions. And as at that point, you don't really need it. Sometimes we move into getting tools, paying for some suits package, spending thousands of dollars on those suits package when you can alternate. So I think these are the issues that have really affected startups. The whole illusion of we are going to be profitable, but for now, let's earn this money. Let's look like we are killing it, but actually you are not killing it. So revenue generation should be the primary goal of every startup. When you start making revenue, and you look at your month on month over a period of time, then you can say, okay, it is scalable. Because there are some business that would even generate revenue, but they are not scalable.
Sure.
So when you now have excess money at your disposal, you end up making bad decisions. It's easier to burn money when you see money than to manage the little you have. So that is my take on it. Thank you.
I mean, thank you so much, Ike, right? So you kind of like answered the question I was going to ask Reina, but I still want to hear her opinion. So, Reina, you said you have your Z Crest have, funded over 40 VCs assistants and counting, right? So
40
I want to
startups
know
across Africa, yes.
40 startups, pardon me, and counting, obviously. So I wanted to know what were the requirements, and amongst these requirements, did you have profitability as part of the requirements for survival for these startups?
At the time, first of all of us, again, Doc mentioned FOMO, right? So at some point, obviously, we fell into nice decks, presentations and whatnot, right? Some businesses looked, could have worked, but again, management is also a different thing. You might have a great business model and then poor management. So did we lose some? Yes. Did we win a lot? We did. What is the criteria? It would be different things. It will be, some of it will be strategic, because it's across different countries. Where do we want to play, for instance, the agri-tech or in fintech or health tech? So the exposure based on the overall strategy as to where we want to allocate funds. Some are impacts focused and things like that, but the fundamental will obviously be, what is the business idea, what is the unique selling points, how do they show profitability and show demand from a local standpoint, but even from a global standpoint, and obviously what sort of policies will support that business play. So it was different things at different points for different sorts of businesses, if you ask me. But then from time to time, obviously we then ask the investors for reports, just kind of see their books. It's not always easy, to be honest, because sometimes, you imagine how many investors are breathing down the founders' necks and they just want to build, and some of them were not really thinking about the business. They think about the business idea and going to markets and driving. For instance, maybe spending money on ads and things like that versus, and perhaps, and not in all cases, don't get me wrong, looking at the business model and building efficiency. So again, it's different things at different points. But we are really interested in building a business that is sustainable, because that's the point. It's supposed to be a going concern. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much, Reina. When we speak about, having startups, like there are some things that we prioritize. From the operations standpoint, Doctor, right? What are the common mistakes that you think, startups make when capital is abundant? Like, for instance, Reina has given me $2 million, and she said, "Don't worry, I trust your vision and everything." What are the mistakes that I'm going to make as a startup founder?
Okay. So let me tell you how, if I'm going to coach and mentor maybe like a startup entrepreneur, so these are the things that I'll be looking out for to guide the person through. Or these are the mistakes that I've even seen. I've seen, and God knows I've seen some wonderful things. Right. So first and foremost is the person, the entrepreneur. Like, you want to gauge the intent of the person. So what's your intent as an entrepreneur? You just got, like $2 million. What's your own personal intent for even raising that amount of money? Because now you've already scaled, the hurdle of, finding a way to bamboozle the investor to at least raise that $2 million. Now you have it in your hands. That's when your true intent to begin to find full reflection, right? Maybe you can, try to deceive everyone, from the beginning, but again, intent to begin to reveal itself in the kind of decisions that you will make, right? And let me tell you part of the things that people will do to bamboozle, right? One of the metrics that will first pick, first of all, is numbers that can make the investor, look really well, which is, in terms of customer acquisition. Now, without even thinking about the value of the customer, in this case, to the business. So somebody can begin to look at vanity metrics in terms of number of users. How about active users, right? So you can have maybe about 100,000, maybe in your first 6 months, 100,000 users in this case now, irrespective of the kind of business, whether it's fintech, edtech, as the case may be, right? And out of the 100,000 users, maybe just about 500 are actively using it. Question is why? Where did you get the excess? Or the difference between 100,000 and 500 active, right? It just means that you've wasted investors' money on marketing spend. Because one of the ways that we measure and gauge, the quality of our marketing spend is to look at the amount of persons that come at the end of the funnel, right? So if you're having 100,000 getting at the beginning of the funnel and they're having 500 come out at the end of the funnel, it already expresses, how the marketing budget was deployed, right? You also find, things around, people try to use that money for personal and self-aggrandizement, That of course will be there. High salaries, of course, will be there. And then of course there could be tendency for over bloating, hiring what you don't really need, because even understanding the business at the beginning might not even be clear from inception. What might be clear is, to come up with the pitch deck. If all the person can see is to come up with if all the person can see is to raise that $2 million, using you as an example now, right? All you can see is that $2 million. And now you've gotten the $2 million, goal accomplished, right? I mean, the mind is not thinking as to building a business. The mind is thinking about getting $2 million, right? So you definitely come up with something, build something, and God help you, you have like good team members, who will come up with ideas and all that, right? But again, your intent and your goal for raising that money will still find itself being expressed, right? And you package, and discuss with your team on how it should be deployed, right? And of course, the money will finish at some point because things are not really clear, right? Because building a business, being an entrepreneur is hard. I think it was Elon Musk who said that being an entrepreneur is like eating glass and looking in the abyss, right? At the same time. So the $2 million is there, but don't forget the person who gave you this $2 million had in his or her mind what he or she considers value. The person definitely values the business and values the equity, right? Getting the $2 million means that there's tendency that you value the $2 million much more than the equity. Whereas you as the entrepreneur, you should even have like a lot more value for the business than you have for the, because one of the things that you want to do when you want to smell the intent of an entrepreneur is how the person even values the equity, not in the sense of how much money the person wants to raise, but how much equity do you even want to hold, and how quickly do you want to have yourself liquidated, or to the extent of how much you really want to be diluted in terms of your equity in the organization. So if you really value the money a lot more than the equity, I mean, I can tell, and that's already a red flag. So what can the entrepreneur do? In this case, you, since you use yourself as an example, you want to raise like $2 million, right? I think it's mostly to stop the bleeding. But of course, no matter the amount of counsel or advice that you're giving, if the intention is still the $2 million, there's no amount of advice that you're going to embrace or accept, right? Because the intention is already clear, mission accomplished, right? And if we continue to bleed that that amount of money, the same model that raised the $2 million, right, we'll use again to go and pitch to the same investors or even more. And don't forget, investors already have some level of equity. So the question will now be, should we stop funding these guys, or we should try to secure the equity we already had by giving them more money to ensure that they're able to, get, to full closure. Maybe they're kind of like midway, instead of, just leaving everything to die and then lose $2 million that we have put in altogether. Let's just give them some more money, maybe like $1 million, so we can push in through. But again, it's still about the intent, which is why truly smart investors don't really invest so much in the business like they invest in the entrepreneur, the team, the people themselves, because it's really about people.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you. I mean, I was listening to the CFO at Y Combinator teach. She gave a lecture on how to secure, how to actually survive as a startup from startup phase till when you are good to go. And one of the things she mentioned that actually stood out was that if you, as a founder, if your sole purpose is to posture only so that you can successfully keep raising funds. Oh, I did Series A, I'm doing Series B, I'm going to the next series. Then you might potentially fail because you would only realize you need more money when your burn rate is high and when you are almost done with the funds you have. So that brings me back to you, Reina. Don't worry, I'm going to be on your case today because I'm sure you interface with a whole lot of founders from different ecosystems, right? So, I mean, at what point should a founder be concerned about their runway? And, what are the early warning signs that that founder should know when cash is becoming a problem?
So just let me make a correction. Zcrest Group invests in businesses. I do investment management, but I'm aware of it because I also have to interact with them, especially from an operational cash operations standpoint, right? How do they invest their business and whatnot? But just from a business standpoint, you're looking at what are they spending money on. You know,
Mhm.
doctor again. I'm always referring to doc, but he spoke about bleeding, right? There sometimes people are just spending money on different things, right? So you want to be sure that they they understand first, they understand the business of the idea, because
Mhm.
sometimes they get enamored with the idea itself that they don't fully appreciate how long it will take to actually break even or run the business, or the intricacies um that are what's the word now, are inherent in that business, right? So you want to see what they're spending money on, what their expense rates are. Do they have, first of all, you know what, even cash, first of all, you can be very profitable on paper. If you don't have cash, all of us, nothing can happen. We cannot even move, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
you want to know what they're doing, what their cash flow looks like, because that's even the very, I think, in my opinion, one of the early warning signs of and obviously what has led to that, cash flows when they're cash strapped, or when they have very low cash flow. So that, I think that's the number one thing. And then you start to look at, the unit economics, because again, are you spending more money, Dr. Steven spoke about, like, acquiring, for instance, you say downloads. Many people downloaded and they say their conversion rate is this. Conversion, is it the impression versus how many people downloaded the app? Is it the number of people that downloaded the app? Does not mean that people signed on to the app. And people signed on to the app does not mean that they transacted. And then, did they how much did they transact? Are they returning customers? What's your churn rate? Do you understand? So it's looking at the different business pillars to see, like, almost auditing the business and dimensioning it and seeing from a demand standpoint what that looks like. How much, what your cost of acquisition is. Sometimes we spend a lot of money on ads, for instance, but we don't have a product to use, a proper product to sell, and so you're just really throwing money away. And even when you say your what's the word, you're spending money on ads, are you tracking, where
Mhm.
those, where do they fall off, for instance, and why are you tracking all of that? Can you track the channels through which your clients come, so they are able to say, this is my most perhaps profitable channel or acquisition channel? So in my opinion, again, in my experience, my limited experience, I might say,
Mhm.
as it relates to direct interaction from a VC standpoint, that's something I've definitely, I've interacted with, and I'll look out for.
Thank you so much, Rena. I mean, what I have identified in this conversation so far is startup founders and businesses should know their numbers, right? Know the expenses you're incurring at the early stages of your business, and also have a responsibility, think towards profitability, right, as a business. This brings me to my next question, Ike. I want to know, from your standpoint, right? I have identified that, oh, I'm burning so much money on poorly planned marketing budgets, poorly executed strategies, probably my lifestyle. I bought a Lambo, and my 2 million is going down. I want to know, what are the things that I would need to now take off, because this is now when it comes to capital preservation. What are the things I need to now begin to cut down? I've answered the question myself, but I want to know from your perspective, what do you think I should now begin to look out for as part of the things to cut down on to survive a little longer?
Okay, so I happen to be the CFO of Vent Africa, which is a crypto startup, and we've had cases like this where you look at your revenue, you look at what the company is making, and you look at what the company is spending, and you know that this is no longer sustainable for a period of time. You get me? So one of the things you need to look out for, one, is to review the whole entire marketing budget, because that is one place people throw a lot of money away for startups. You get me? The whole marketing budget. I sometimes I tell my team that sometimes we should reinvest into retention. There are people who have used the product, and they like the product, and for one reason or the other they stop using the product. We need to know why they stopped using the product. And those are the people, if you're able to solve their problem, those people can also help grow your marketing through organic referrals. So you need to look at your marketing budget. Another thing is, when the going is good, you tend to hire people you don't need. You see some people, they have up to 15, 20 persons in their marketing team. Sorry, it's like I'm attacking marketing department so much. But they have like over over the number that is needed for a certain department. So you need to calm down on your hire. You need to calm down on your hire. You need to calm down on your general expenses. You need to look at your book. Is this so? By then, you start prioritizing. What are the things that we need? What are the things that we don't need? What are the tools that we need? What are the tools that we don't need? I will bring an example. There was a time where a friend of mine was paying over $8 or $9,000 monthly for web server. And we were having a conversation, and he told me, man, it's month end, and man, I need to pay for my web server. I was like, oh, which platform are you using? He told me, and I was like, those guys are quite expensive. And he was like, that was what was recommended. That was what the CTO said is good and secured and all that. I said, "Oh, though that's the truth, but I mean, you're a startup, you're just coming in. Why you consider security? You also consider your pocket." And then he said, "How much are you paying?" I told him we are paying less than $1,000, almost $1,000 then. And I was like, "How?" I introduced him to my CTO then, and they had a conversation. And my CTO was able to help them reduce the cost of their server expense from $8,000 to $2,000. So sometimes we pay for products and services that service our business without actually doing in-depth research on what are the alternatives, how can we get it cheaper. Some persons pay thousands of dollars emails for email service, and there are some product that offer you that same suite, that same service, but for the fact that you want to go for name, you want to go for, oh, these people, they are the biggest in this sector. Sometimes we patronize product because of name. So these are the things you need to look into your book, one after the other, into your operations, into your marketing, into your accounting, into everything. So that way you can be able to reduce your expense to a certain level, and then you can stay in business.
That makes sense. Thank you so much, Olili. It's even interesting to know that you are the CFO of a startup. When did you become the CFO of that startup, and how early in the, because I
Okay,
mean, if the startup is hiring a CFO, that means they have so much money.
so you are bringing me, Ben, you know me very well. So why are you doing this to me? This you are putting me on the spot. So
I just had to ask.
okay, Vent Africa started in 2021. With Let me not call numbers, but we are trying, we are surviving.
Mm,
And
mm,
over time, I'm a co-founder alongside my partner, who is currently the CEO. So I started as a CEO, he started as a CTO. So we're handling multiple positions.
exactly what I wanted to point out.
I was handling the treasury, I was handling the CFO role, I was handling accounting, I was being the CEO, he was being the CTO, head of product, head of. So, but as we grow and as demand comes in, we started shifting positions. I left the CEO position for him to take over. He moved from the CTO to being the CEO and CTO, and then he moved the CTO to one of his boys. So we are growing in that light. We brought in an accountant, brought in a treasury officer. Basically, me being the CFO is a name, because I
Mm,
mean I have like a team already around the finance who are experienced, and they are literally doing everything. If I wake up tomorrow and say I want to bring in a CFO for the company, you know how much I will be paying a CFO. You
exactly,
get me?
exactly.
And when we have all resources around that department, so it's part of the saving cost mechanism. If we are going into, let's say, we've not raised funds for the past 5 to 6 years we've been in business. So if there is now demand, You look at the big players like permit me to mention names like the Money Point, the Flutter Wave. They got to a stage where they started bringing X from so and so bank to hold in this role, X from so and so place to hold in this role. They got to that stage because they were profitable, they've raised, and you can see that the solution is viable and feasible in the market. The likes of Cola are doing it also. Cora has a lean team to an extent. I mean, I am close to you guys, so I understand how things are done that way. But the moment you start going above and beyond your budget in hiring people you don't need, stretching your pocket, you end up in this crisis. And one thing most startup founders are not realizing is revenue revenue may grow from month on month and also may decline depending on the market. I'll give you instance. I don't think there's any crypto startup is having increased revenue now because generally the market is bad. I think Coinbase reported that their volume or their revenue dropped by I think up to 60%, and they have to lay off some staffs. A way of trying to manage the situation. So while you are scaling, while revenue is coming in, you should be very careful to start bloating your expenses and increasing
Yeah.
your budget. It's very, very important so that you can have cash. That's when they say save for rainy days. So that when rainy
Exactly.
days come, you have something to survive the company over that period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ike. I mean, it's just exciting to see that we are not just having these conversations, but we are actually experiencing and living through it in our day to day, right? I brought that question up because I know how, building a lean team helps to reduce, burn, to reduce your burn rate across the market. I know we've overflogged this topic, but I want to hear from Doctor's perspective. Doctor has mentioned severally, but again, I just want to pick Doctor's brain and know when will it now be time from as an operations person, right? When is it now the right time to hire? Also, when is it the right time to improve and to scale your processes as a startup founder?
Okay, you mean whether or not you have funding or when you have raised
No,
funding?
yes, when you have, progress, when you're moving across the career, like when is it a good time? At what time do you know, okay, I'm ready to start taking on a lot more expenses, to scale my business?
Okay, so I don't think, irrespective of size, whether big, small, medium, or large company, I don't think there's any company that is really interested in growth that is super excited about expenses, right? I mean, what's profit? Profit is basically R minus C, revenue minus cost. All right. And the way we maximize profit is to maximize your revenue as much as possible and minimize your cost as much as possible.
Yeah.
That gives you the margins, right? Your goal as an entrepreneur, as a startup founder, is to make sure that you are consistently maximizing your margins, which means you are looking for ways to continually maximize your revenue and then minimize your cost. So I've not seen a smart business that's really interested in really increasing expenses so much because that thins out your margin, right? At zero profit and maybe leads to loss. All right. So, but to answer a question, I mean, there's no way you can actually try to say you want to maximize profits without having to spend something. You have to spend. I mean, there's this basic term that says you have to spend money to make money, right? So you definitely have to spend. So to answer a question as to when it's time to spend, it's basically to focus on what you really need, right? Smart spending, what you really need, not wasteful spending, right? There's this terminology called blitz scaling, which is, and that's the game, that had been played by some, come up with a deck, pitch to the investor, raise the fund, scale the business like really intensely, hire a lot of people, get the work done, get the product, ship the product to the market. Let's see if I can acquire too much results. Whether it's making profit or not the issue. Then go for after getting your pre-seed, you get your seed round, and then you go to series A. And then from Series A, go to Series B, right? Just be acquiring. So the focus is now on basically increasing the valuation, right? Investing a lot in marketing, investing a lot in acquiring a lot of people and doing plenty of storytelling, because I mean, the rule still remains that valuation is a function of perception, right? People value based on how they see the business. And so lots of stories will be done around, marketing will be done around that. So at least this company can be seen as maybe a $500 million company or a billion, dollar company. Now, as an entrepreneur, yes, spend, but spend smartly. Focus on what you really need. If it can be done by one person, why hire two persons, for that same role, right? If it can be done by software or a tool that can get the job done, for you at $100 a month, why do you have to, fill in that role and spend $2,000, to get the same job done? Right. In economics, is this term, about being capital intensive or labor intensive. I mean, till now, we still have quite a couple of products, cheap from China. Why? Because they have the numbers, they have the population, and they designed their system in such a way that they can leverage that number. Right. So it's more of like a labor intensive. That's why labor is cheap there. So maybe a car that you can buy from the United States, that maybe could be about $200,000 for a car. Okay. I think that's too high end. Let me just come to maybe like let's say like $80,000 car from the US. The Chinese version of that same car, maybe not brand, but the same level, can be about $20,000, which is discounted, by 4. Just because of the numbers, they were cheap there, right? The software engineer might be earning up to about $150,000, a year in Silicon Valley, on the average, versus a similar engineer in China that may be earning maybe around 50 to 80,000 US dollars, right? This just means that as an entrepreneur, what you should be thinking about is maximizing your revenue as much as possible, minimizing your cost as much as possible. Yes, I'm going to spend, but how smartly are you spending? You don't just spend for spending's sake, right? I like the analogy that IT gave. I mean, someone is spending this much, about $9,000 a month, just to web post, right? And then he was able to help them, get it done for $2,000. So, which means they've been literally setting $7,000 on fire every month. It's just like gathering $7,000 and setting. That's literally what was going on. Burning cash, literally, which is not a smart way to do. The way you know the quality and value of an entrepreneur is the ability to be able to max profit, max margin, capture value, deliver value, and then being able to capture as much value as possible and maximize margins where possible. So it's not to say don't spend, because of course you need to hire people, and spending in this case may not even be in monetary terms. Sometimes you may just have to find the best of people and then maybe reward them in exchange for equity if you don't have. I mean, most of the great companies, if you don't have the cash at that point, even Apple started that way. Most companies started that way, right? Even in Nigeria, so it's not just a Silicon Valley thing. We've had the case of Apple where the early founders were rewarded in stock, right, before they even raised the first round of money, right, from secure capital. So it's just to say that you as a startup founder, be very intentional about it. And I don't think it's something really difficult because we do it with our personal life, right? And that is, if you have your own money, how do you run that money?
Exactly.
Right? Because every human being is rational. The same way business is rational. You want to maximize your benefits as much as possible. You want to minimize your cost as much as possible, right? And it just means that, okay, so just imagine someone, has 50,000, let's just say someone has 50,000 naira cash. I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a student in school now, just to be as basic in the explanation. And the person has maybe 50,000 naira as pocket money as a secondary school student, right? And the person knows that he or she is not getting the next 50,000, until the next month. Now, at the beginning of when the student gets 50,000, naira, I mean, the spending can be, this can be like a huge spree, and then it gets to the middle of the month and it's remaining like maybe 5,000. Somehow, smartness kicks in. And it's just human rationality. And then you now begin to gauge how you spend the balance. And then you find that the guy is actually smart enough to manage that $5,000 to last him or her till the end of the month, compared to how it was at the beginning. This is exactly how a couple of startup founders really behave. But that discipline is crucial from the beginning, right? And that's why I said it's about smart spending, right? When you spend for what you need. What you can get for free, maximize it, particularly at the early days. Maximize it. What you can give in exchange for equity, you can use that, particularly if you have like smart people who you like to retain for a long time. You really want to reward and retain those guys with equity for quite some time, and then to build the business until you start, making money. If you find out that your inflows are not matching your outflows, it also tells you that you should not be bleeding money like anyhow, right? It's just smart spending, right? But when you see, lavish spending, it means there's a lot of I want to recommend every startup founder to go study the story of real work, right? I mean, lots of money being raised, um, but lots of waste, right? I think that story will help every startup entrepreneur, find him or herself to know exactly, where exactly am I here? Am I really an entrepreneur, or just trying to, live on investors' money?
I mean, thank you so much, Doctor. This makes a lot of sense. It's funny how you use the illustration of the students whose monthly stipend is running low. I mean, this also applies to us in our everyday lives, right? I'll give you an example of myself as a salary earner, right? On the day of my, in fact, on Instagram right now, you will see trends about salary week. You see people, doing skits or reels around salary week. Around that time when funds are going to come in, you are most excited, and then over time, when it probably diminishes, your face is becoming straight. The other day I was making a joke with my friend, and I was just telling him, guy, around the time of payment, you become a payout infrastructure because you find yourself making payments to all the debts you've incurred all through the month. But I mean, it's just exciting because he walks around um, every sphere of our lives, right? You begin to conserve when you are scared that, oh, you're running to the bottom and you're running low on your resources. But that brings us to an exciting part of this conversation as we begin to wrap up and prepare for questions from the audience, if any. So, I mean, if you have any questions and you're on this session, you can type it into the comment section. And when we get there, we'll just bring it up for the panelists to attend to them, right? So before we go to, that segment, the last chapter of this conversation is around making every penny that you have or raise work harder for you in your startup journey. And the first person I would like to react to this particular topic is Rena. So my question to you, Rena, is startups are actually becoming intentional about cash management, right? So beyond keeping money in the bank, how should founders, think about managing the cash they have, more strategically?
Right. That question, if anybody asks me, I'm always getting when I have conversations with people, I wonder why they keep their cash idle. Right? Cash is an asset. So if you look at your balance sheet, you will see machinery and all of those things. Like you will see cash. But I don't think not many people think about cash in that way, because you would even see a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I'm about to use it to buy something. Oh, we're going to use it to pay salaries by the end of the month. And we're talking, this is 3 weeks to the end of the month. And I'm wondering why is it not earning anything? In any case, even not only is inflation impacting that money that's sitting at zero, it's actually not sitting at zero. There's inflation, and then there is obviously the lost interest, because you could have been doing something and it would have added, you could have paid out some expense with the interest or the income that you will get from, investing that money short term. So I think we should look at cash the same way, with the same intentionality as we look at every other business asset, right? If we approach it that way, then you're starting to think about, okay, what do I not need very soon? So it's almost like reserve cash, right? I mean, it will not happen. It will not apply in every business in the same way, but you want to keep some cash for unexpected events, or never touch unless it's necessary. And based on your business model, you then know how much that is. First of all, I even think that thinking about it as a business asset will help you even plan better, right? Around your cash flow. Also, you want to think about operating cash. So maybe you want to pay salaries or something, or even to buy, I don't know how people pay for power, typically, but maybe diesel, water, whatever it is, depending on how you run your business again. You want to keep it liquid. But even then, between operating cash and perhaps strategic cash, so for instance, you need to make vendor payments, right, in the next 3 months. Your software is going to expire in 6 months, so you're going to plan for that cash. The question is, what is it doing before you expend? And you want to look at all the different options around that are flexible, because also that's what I hear. A lot of people think investing is also locking in your money for the long term, but there is just an array of different solutions, right? And you choose what's best fit for you. You have different money market funds that are very like open-ended. They are flexible. I always think about them. The way I try to explain money market funds are like, imagine a savings account, but you are earning maybe fixed deposit interest, but you can also take the money out at any time and you're not going to pay liquidation charges. Do you get my point? So you want to sweat your free cash flow as much as possible, because the alternative is zero or less, less than minus rather, right? So that's how I think about it. Think about your plan it as an asset, or be intentional about cash as an asset class, or as an asset the way you would treat your other business assets. Categorize what you need as operating cash, as strategic cash, as perhaps reserve cash. What a lot of people think about is that treasury management is for large corporations, but I always say that to even startups, right? The way you treat your business today, treat your business today the way you would treat it if it was a conglomerate or if it was a unicorn. Only at different stages you would scale. You would treat it the same way, but obviously with different tools at different points in time, because how you do one thing is how you do everything, in my opinion.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Rena. That means, maximize the use of your idle cash to get value, during that time. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. Let me go back to Dr. Steve. Okay, just chill. I'm coming to you shortly, and I'll talk to you around how to scale sustainably. So, Dr. Steve, what financial discipline separates startups that survive challenging periods, from those that struggle? I know you can actually just rephrase it in another way because you talked extensively on this topic, but just let me know, what are the financial discipline that would, make me, be smarter than the person who's struggling, after collecting $2 million from Zcrest?
Okay. I think first and foremost is that's as a startup company now,
Yes.
as a company that is growing, is to get your goals really clear, right? Get your goals really clear. What's the financial goal of the organization, realistically so, right? Assuming, last year you did a revenue of about, let's even come like really, really low. Let's say about $500,000 in revenue. Maybe you now want to look at how you can either 10x that. What does it take to 10x that realistically, given the potential growth? Because at that level, there's a lot of potential for growth. A lot of potential for growth that you want to see at that point, right? If the revenue is way below cost, that's a different conversation. If the revenue outweighs the cost, it means they have some margins, that they can reinvest into the same business and then grow it. Now, in terms of financial discipline, the basics and the fundamentals should not be discarded, right? Set aside for capital formation purposes, right? If truly the business, has already achieved like some level of product market fit, it means that if your investment of $1,000 is helping you to achieve an outcome of $10,000, it just makes sense that you've figured out a formula there, which is like 10x, right? So whatever additional stuff you have, you set aside to deploy more capital into it to scale it further, right? Because you figured out that for every 1,000 you put, you're able to ship out $10,000 value, right? Because you've not only achieved product market fit, you've gotten to a point where you've cracked it, you understand how the business works, you figured out the formula, you know for every 1,000, you're able to generate 10,000. Now you can now look at how you can scale the factors of your 1,000 to scale the outcomes of what your revenue can be, right? But you'll be able to do that if you are not setting aside for capital formation, right? Which is simple English is savings for the purpose of investing in the business. Like Brianna said, if the capital has no purpose at that point in time, put it somewhere and let it be working instead of you being the slave, right? I mean, if your money is idle, I mean, somebody is the slave. Yes, it's not the money, it's you, right? When the money is working is when you're the boss. All right. So is to get the money in a place that can until you're able to now deploy it into the business because it's something clear. Don't just deploy money into the business when things are not clear and you've not figured out how it can scale. When you figured out, you know, what I already said, like for every 1,000 reports, you're able to get like $5,000 or $10,000, then we already know exactly what it is, that this is a 10x or 5x business. So we already know that we should put the money in this and this and this, and then we're able to scale across, right? So that should be clear. Now, to maximize that amount of money, which of course, and I'm saying this because, I mean, the question is tailored towards entrepreneurs in this case now, startup in this case, the basics of building a business should be attended to in order to optimize the value. And the basics for any business that will scale, irrespective of size, number one is the product, right? The product has to be good enough. So if there's an investment in the product that you want to make that can further help to scale that, beautiful, right? Which is like maybe investing in R&D to increase the value of the product or to increase the quality or quantity of the product. Number two is processes. So important. The processes will tell you how optimal you are as a business, right? Which means, is it possible for, if the business now is doing $10,000 for every 1,000 put in, is it possible for the business to do $20,000 for every 1,000? The solution to that is where the process is coming. What's happening in between? All right, these are the basics and fundamentals that most entrepreneurs don't think about because it's not just buying and selling. All right, the processes simply saying how do we get, how many steps get us there. If it can be done in one step, why are we doing it in 5 steps? Don't forget that for every step you're incurring cost in monetary terms, cost in time terms, right? So just imagine that you have to jump 100 times to make $1,000 versus you jump 1 time to make the same amount of money. So I'm using that as an analogy to express what processes mean. So you have businesses that they have lots of steps in each process, and each step is costing them money, and then they are bleeding money out. That's not healthy for a business. So as for any business, irrespective of size, number one, the product has to be great, right? Number two, you have to keep looking at your processes. And number three, which is super valuable, is people. People, super important. And this has to do with the quality of the people. I mean, try to attract and retain the best of people who think like owners, people who can understand the vision of where the business is going, which means you as an entrepreneur, a co-founder, an entrepreneur, or the leader of the company, you must be visionary enough to be able to sell and communicate what the vision is, and it should be big enough and inspiring enough for them to pursue. And then you want to unleash them to give them the opportunity to also help you take that vision bigger, right? And then incentivize them in a way by which they can think like owners, and also have a healthy culture in the company that can help to keep them, and then give them the opportunity to contribute and add lots of value to the business, right? If we get these 3 right, you definitely make profit if you get this right. These are just the
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'm forced to ask, have you written a book? I could actually give the title of that book, The 3 P's.
I've actually written 3 books, but I've not paid so much attention to it. I've not paid so much attention to it.
It's actually a good one. Thank you so much for that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Understanding the product.
Am I the one who is out? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I said I've written 3 books, but I've not. It's not my focus and concern like for the recent times. Right.
I will be looking out for the
I
fourth
did that
one.
while I was actively involved in Hebron Startup Lab. Now I just operate at the board level.
All right. Nice to know, Doctor. Nice to know, actually. Thank you so much for those insights. I think you've said it all. Every one of you have been spot on, like on all of these conversations, right? But now we want to go to those startups who have now, taken our advice or have from experience gotten to the level where they are able to scale. The next question would be, how can they actually now scale sustainably? So I'll bring that to IK. And my question for you, IK, is that many startups now focus on scaling very quickly, and you had touched on this earlier. But what does scaling responsibly look like for you in today's markets?
Okay, so in today's market, scaling responsibly has to do with understanding the product that you are selling. Is your product sellable? You are not forcing the product on people. There are some marketing that are very, very aggressive, but what the product they are marketing is not, how do I put it, will not be able to generate that much revenue. It's not market fit, so to say. So if you want to scale responsibly in today's market, first of all, you need to understand that your idea is one thing. How you execute that idea into a product is another thing. How that product is going to be to attain market fitness is another thing. How it's going to stay longer and compete with the competitors is another thing. Take, for instance, neobanks. There's a lot of payments already. Payment, banking the unbank and not banking the unbank and all that. And then you want to go into this sector. What is that thing you're going to be doing different? What is the market cap of that particular sector? Because sometimes there are some businesses that no matter how much you invest into marketing that business, there's a max revenue it's going to generate. That is why you see some products, you see a logistic company start adding gift cards, start adding utility payments, start adding other products, because they are now realizing that I think we've touched the ceiling of this our sector. So scaling responsible has a lot to do with how you structure your team, how you structure the product, what are the environmental factors to consider. For instance, you're running a food delivery startup. You're running it in Lagos State, you're running it in Abuja, and then you get to a stage where you need to scale to other city. How do you move about it? Do you think, okay, this market is already saturated or it is not saturated? Then you need to consider your burn. You need to consider your burn. Are you burning money on what is not needed? For instance, you have a fintech, and then your KYC platform, it's difficult to onboard people. Why you spend up to $2, $3, up to $5 or even $10 on onboarding one user, and then your market, your targeted audience are not the customers that are going to use your product. So you end up having 100,000 users, verified users, burning your server resources.
I think IK's network, is having some network issues. Okay. Yes, are you back, IK?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, cool.
So like I was saying, when you start pushing a lot towards customer acquisition, and then these users you're acquiring are not the people who are to patronize your product. and then they end up burning your resources. Indirectly, you are having users, you're having 10,000, 20,000 users coming in. One, they are not even using the product, they are not generating revenue for you, and they're also consuming from you, because the AML tools you are using, the server resources, the whatever, a lot of tools that you are using, you will be spending more on that. So first thing first is you need to also identify your customers. Know your customers. When you know your customers, know how they behave. That way you can be able to build your product around how they behave. So scaling will now move from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, just like that. It's a step by step. And also, if you're starting from start, you need to grow your business organically. Resist the urge of starting to pump money into marketing because you don't know what will actually work. So when you growing your business organically, I can use Vent for instance. Vent is currently sitting around above 50,000 users. And when we started, from 0 to 10,000 were organic. Like we didn't do much marketing. We were not even budgeting for marketing. We're doing more of personal conviction, people referring people, and we're tracking these metrics and saying that okay, we can have 10 sign up, and out of those 10 sign up, six are already trading, and four is maybe hanging on KYC and the rest. So then you know that you know the demographic of your customers. Okay, there are a lot of customers in Lagos, there are a lot of customers in Delta State, there are a lot of customers in Enugu State, there are no customers in Borno, there are no customers in Kaduna. You need to know your numbers down to how they behave, how they react to the app, how they use the app. There are some
Yeah.
that are trading BTC alone, there are some that are trading USDT alone. So you need to understand these things for you to say, okay, I think we are now matured enough to go full blown on marketing. We can now push. And there's difference between marketing and brand awareness and sales.
Mm, mm.
A
Uh,
lot of persons.
like it seems like I'm just picking this up. Sorry to cut you, but it seems like your marketers will not really like you in your company.
No,
You don't really.
I'm a bone on their neck because I mean it's one place that drains the company's pocket down
Mm,
to bigger institution. Marketing is one place that drains the company's pocket because the sometimes the metrics they bring back to the table cannot be measured. They
mm,
can be
mm,
defended but cannot be measured. They can tell you, oh, but we were able to do a CAC of 2,000 naira and we acquired 30,000 users.
mm, mm,
They can defend that numbers. But I mean, does this 30,000 users reflect the volume, the transaction count, and the revenue we are targeting? Does it reflect it? So it
mhm,
doesn't reflect it. So you need to go back to the drawing board to know how to target these persons. And another thing is, what are the regulatory concerns in your business? What are the regulatory concerns in your business? At what point are you going to come to limelight and then you start meeting a whole lot of hurdles? So that will help you shaping how you want to scale. And what is your revenue margin? There are some businesses that the revenue margin, revenue to volume ratio might be up to 0.5%, 1%, 2%, 10%. So you see somebody doing $1 million and making $50,000, $40,000 in revenue, and you see somebody doing up to 20,000, $20 million, and they are still making that same revenue. So you need to understand your revenue margin before you say you want to go full blown on marketing, because at the end of the day, you will end up burning, raising your volume,
mhm.
and your revenue margin is not that much, and then it becomes a problem to your business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ike. That makes a lot of sense because I mean we experience this, day on day, week on week, month on month. One of the key things any founder or manager would be looking out for is like to work with a team that understands their numbers, right? Knowing exactly where you are today, knowing exactly what your strategies are looking to help you, achieve in the next couple of days or even on a weekly overview, right? So even in my team, we study our data, we study the data, day on day, week on week, and we compare it month till date compared to last month. We look through to see what are the areas where we can improve. As small as we are, we try to do all of that so that we can grow. I think these are like key things you have to put in place. Thank you so much. I picked three things from you. So understand your product. You might build a product that everybody's signing up on, but nobody's actually using. So you're not able to really convert. So understand that product. Is that product really good in that market? Understand the customers that you're working with. Push towards retention, right? The customers you get on board must convert, right? The customer's life cycle is complete when they transact and they come back again, and probably even when they even tell some other person to do as they have done. And then finally, understand the revenue margins, right? Understand the margin of your business so that you can capitalize on the most profitable aspects of your business. Thank you so much, Ike, for those kind words. I think we'll go to Doctor and Rena. Let me allow Rena speak for first. So Rena, I have a question for you. I mean, you are advising me as a 12-month-old founder, right? And I have just 12 months, just 1 year of my capital left. What would be the first three things you would give to me as an advice for me to, effect into my business to help me survive beyond 12 months?
Thanks, Ben. I mean, you already mentioned some of these when you were recapping what Ike said. What is your unit economics, know your numbers, which of your products or customers or channels are actually, creating value. So it helps you, know what to focus on, because sometimes your business is growing, but your sale is making you poorer because you do not know, what is actually driving the value, right? And so if you scale, you're only accelerating the problem if you're not thinking about what's driving value, what are what products, which of the customer audiences, for instance, and channels are creating value, how can you tweak? Sometimes there's no harm in even retiring some products. If it's not working, it's not working, just so you can make, data-driven decisions at the end of the day. Second would be, it's not just how much. So if you think about your cost or cash, like I said earlier, it's not just how much are you, spending, what are you spending on? Because sometimes you might say, oh, I'm cutting costs, but that might be to the detriment of the business if you're not thinking again about the data. What are the expenses that drive growth, right? So, what's your customer retention or core product development costs, for instance? Those are the things, those are some of the things that will drive growth. So you cannot, you want to be mindful about cutting those costs or just cutting arbitrarily, right? Versus what are the things that can be delayed to, to maybe later or even eliminated totally. And third would be, what are your revenue drivers and the pipelines? You spoke about it again when you're talking about retention, right? Are there opportunities to improve, customer or increase customer retention? Can you cross-sell or upsell to existing customers your different products? Can you introduce new revenue streams? Because it's easier, like, when you talk about retention, it's easier and cheaper to retain existing customers than to acquire new ones. So what are you doing about that? So you need to check your churn rate. You need to see how you're increasing clients' wallet share, cross-selling, all of that. So those would be three things, yeah.
Thank you so much. Shelve it if you cannot scale it. Know your revenue drivers and then understand the pipelines. Interesting. Thank you so much. Doctor, you have the floor. What are those three things you would advise me to do within 12 months?
Okay. I think Ren has mentioned a couple, but there's one that's coming to my mind now that I'll just give in form of an analogy, which is more of like, I think we've touched even this earlier. I don't know who mentioned it, whether it's Ren or Ike, right? But I'll just give in form of an analogy now. The way the human body works, looking at the circulatory system, is to allow blood to circulate around the entire body, right? But if the human body has an accident, maybe an injury, that leads to an exposure, and then blood is being spilled out. Now, what does first aid teach us when bleeding takes place? First aid simply, number one, stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding first. So, you want to survive and maybe even make it to your 12 months or even go beyond. First, stop the bleeding. What are those exercises? I mean, I've worked with, a couple of founders. I've advised, quite a number of them. One is even coming to my mind right now, where they had resources, and they were doing quite well, but I think they got to a point where they felt they needed to, give themselves like a huge payday. So that shifted the entire culture of the organization, right? There were actually two of them, two co-founders. They wanted to satisfy themselves with the enterprise, with the organization that they had. So what happened was that they had various needs. So you can imagine when the personal needs of the founders are competing with the needs of the business, whereas the business is the one that is actually needing the funds to stay alive and to grow. I knew at the point in their business that they needed funding in the business to achieve certain things, and the business had that money. But at that point, they really wanted to drive a particular kind of car each, and then also have a truck with mobile police, move them around, more of like a fame kind of thing, just to, blow around, blow the horn, just to, just to have fun. All right. And I knew the business because I'd gone through their books, I'd gone through their numbers, I checked everything. I knew they were making a very foolish, dumb decision. Right. Unfortunately, we have quite a number of founders who think like this. And that's why I started by saying that at the beginning, when you asked me the question, when it's about the intent, what's the intention of this entrepreneur? Consider a business as a goose that lays golden eggs. Your job is to make sure you consistently nourish this goose to consistently lay for you golden eggs. And if you're smart enough, you want to take some of the golden eggs and hatch more geese. All right. So you can have multiple, in this case, products, geese that are helping you to lay multiple golden eggs. All right. And the way you want to do that is to make sure you don't allow this goose to bleed to death. You want to make sure you heal that goose, right? Stop all the bleeding, all the excess costs. Go and sell the G-Wagon. A friend of mine actually invested in a startup, and this entrepreneur first went to buy Range Rover for himself. Because what's the meaning of that? All right. This is investors' money. Go and sell all those things and get, if really this business means much to you, then invest. Right? Invest your capital in it. In fact, I know quite a number of investors who will not invest anything until they've seen and gauged the amount of your own money you've actually put inside the business before you begin to gamble with their own money. Right? So number one, stop bleeding. Number two is, let's get back to the fundamentals. Redefine what you consider success. Don't use revenue just as a means for success. Use profit as a means for success. Stop looking at vanity metrics and then you're measuring users. Focus on active users, active paying users, right? Active paying users, right? And that's super, super crucial. Then, of course, I mentioned the fundamentals around what basics we should be looking at if your goal is to build a business, right? And this is what I'm going to say. If you really want to maximize your 12 months runway, right? If your focus is on how to survive through that period, apparently you'll be using the balance of money left, and the focus will be on expenses, right? This money we're going to spend it to last us this particular period. So instead of the mind, at that point, let me tell you where the mind will be thinking. The mind will be thinking of how to raise money again to extend the runway, because the mind is already thinking about how to make use of that money to last for 12 months. What if the mindset changes to what can we do with this amount of resources that we have to get our product right, to get our processes right, to get our people right, to achieve product market fit, and then actually sell this company, right? And that's where, because if the product is truly right, for me, my definition of a right product is a product that is needed and people are willing to pay for, right? And I categorize products into two. Products can either be a vitamin or they can either be pain relievers. I mean, vitamins are like people might do without vitamins. So is your product a kind of vitamin, or your product is a pain reliever? When people have the pain point, they pay to have that pain relieved. So if you're going to build your product, true market fit is when your product is like a pain reliever, right? So it's actually helping people to relieve of their pain. So when to get that right, all you need to start doing is to begin to look for the 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 100 million people who are willing to pay you $1 every month to have this paid leave, which is 100 million US dollars in revenue every month. And then you cannot begin to offset costs. And God help you, are using your revenue. That gives you the opportunity to scale as much as possible. So to answer a question, number one, stop bleeding. Number two, get the fundamentals right. Get your goal right. Stop looking at vanity metrics. Be measuring the right thing. The amount of money you raised is not a measure of success. You raised 10 million US dollars is not success. Actually, the more money you raise, the more responsibility is on you. That's what many people don't think about, right? The more responsibility is on you, because it's either if the money you raise is debt finance, that means you have to figure out how to pay back. If it's equity finance, it means you are being diluted. You're actually shrinking the value of your equity. And if you're a good entrepreneur, then we know that, okay, yes, you have traded your equity to build a bigger pie. But what if it doesn't lead to the, enlargement of your pie? I mean, how do you reward yourself? How do you reward your investors? How do you reward every other person? So get the fundamentals right by having the right metrics and measuring. Profit should be part of it, right? And finally, the fundamentals of building a business: get the product right? Get the process right, and then get the results.
Wow, that was another educative one again. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Stephen, Rena, and Ikechukwu, for your time with us. I think we are very close to the end of this one. Every other question, I'm going to package it into one. So before we go to like the final notes from all of you, I would like to take two questions from the audience, right? So I got two questions, and then if you still have questions, just drop them in the comment section. I can pick them up very quickly and allow any of the panelists to react to them. So let me bring the first question up. Yes, thank you so much. This one is from David Adigu. Pardon me if I murdered your name. It said, how do you build realistic forecasts in an environment with high inflation and currency volatility? I mean, I would allow any of the panelists to respond to this as you deem fit.
Okay, let me take a bit of this. So first of all, you deal with the reality. The reality is that we're in a high inflation and environment, and obviously you're not sure about the currency. I mean, it's a bit stable now, but different things happen at different times. What you want to do then is have what you call scenario building, right? What are you going to do? Because you know that change is constant and you cannot, the environment is not guaranteed. Then you want to say, what's my best case scenario, my mid case and worst case? We're optimistic, I think they're like optimistic, pessimistic, and best, or something like that. But essentially, it's looking at your business and dimensioning it and saying, again, it's about understanding your numbers, right? So if the unit cost goes up by this percentage because the currency change or the devaluation, for instance, at this rate. So you can't say if the currency devalues by 20% or by 50% or by 100%. I mean, just whatever numbers work for you, then you can see the direct impact on your business. Same with inflation, right? If inflation from the standpoint of even like your customers paying or the ability to pay, plus inflation as it impacts interest rates, for instance, if you are borrowing from maybe like you have an overdraft to the bank, depending on your business model. So you want to build those scenarios so that you can see the impact on your business, same way that you would do budgeting, for instance, but you have different scenarios and what you would do should those happen, right? So you already are ready, when those things are able to kick in. You want to do regular review of the business, of your business, to see how far or near you are to each scenario, right? So that you can then take an informed action, or at least be as prepared as you possibly can.
Thank you so much, Rena. Doctor, you wanted to go as well?
Yes, I just wanted actually what I said was ladies first. So let me just share my own thoughts. To answer the question, First is to make it clear that planning is super, super crucial, right? I mean, the saying still remains: he that fails to plan plans to fail. All right, so planning is crucial. Forecasting is a form of planning. But to answer the person's question, like how do you plan or forecast, when there are variables that you don't have 100% control over, right? In this case, inflation, like the person said, of which is not even only inflation, there are lots of variables. If you remember, there's this thing, I think it's PESTLE, they call it, about the various environments that influences business, the political environment. I mean, now there's a change in government, so how would that impact foreign investors begin to look and ask whether they should invest or they should get their money out, right? We have the economic environment, which covers what you mentioned, and that's the inflation part, because inflation is just a piece in the economic environment, or the social environment, right? Or the technology environment, right? And the legal environment, and all the various environments that could influence this, right? So number one, it's important to plan. But when you're planning, factor in these variables, right? Because it's not like 1 + 1 = 2, right? There are other factors that make 1 + 1 = 1,000, and 1 + 1 = -1,000. So you want to factor in these variables when you are planning. Don't plan in isolation of the variables, right? Plan for the worst case scenario, plan for the normal scenario, and plan for the best case scenario. Use that. That will give you like the range of what are the possibilities that can happen if anything happens, right? For instance, as a smart startup, and this is me speaking in general, I'm using this as an example now. Part of the things that you should do when you're planning, looking at, assuming you're seeing your revenue taking a particular trajectory. You also want to look at the broader economy and say, oh, okay, maybe this is why we're making this much money is because there's a policy that encourages blah, 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 blah. But what if there's a change in policy that impacts that? As a smart entrepreneur, what you want to start doing is building your war chest, reserving as much as possible, so that even when there's a policy somersault or a policy shift, right, you want to make sure you have enough reserve in your war chest to make sure you're able to compete, you're able to still pay salaries and retain the best talent until there's a change in the tide, right? All this also is part of planning. You're planning for the worst case scenario, right? So that's just to give like an instance. If you lose your topmost engineer that is responsible for the main things where you're particularly as a tech company, what will happen? Assuming the guy, goes with every single thing, all the stacks, what happens to your business, right? What have you planned to hedge against that? And that's where the technological environment also comes in. And this is even internally, not even talk about the external environment. How do you plan for that? Because forecasting is not just about the monetary terms. It also, talks about your product. What happens if someone comes with a new product that makes your own existing product look obsolete? Meaning, you stop buying yours and they move to the others. What are you doing to plan against such scenarios? Are you saving well enough to make sure you're able to invest in R&D to ensure that your product remains competitive instead of having a me-too product, right? So these are just instances, just summarizing to say that if you are, number one, you must plan. That I've made very clear. You have to plan, right? But when you're planning, don't plan in isolation of variables that could impact your plan, right?
Thank you so much, Doctor. That was actually spot on. I think we have one other question, and then
I wanted to add to what
please
Dr.
go ahead.
Arena.
Go ahead.
So in programming, there's what we call conditional statement, meaning some condition has to be met for an action to happen, and that is what you have to implement in terms of this kind of situation. So first of all, when we talk about planning, you need to plan your business as you have it in mind. Plan your business, okay, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years growth plan. Now, you now have these conditions, these factors that you're going to be considering, because inflation and currency volatility is a factor. their government policies. Just like in 2021, the then CBA governor woke up and said, oh, banks and fintech should no longer work with crypto startup. And then there was crisis everywhere. Nobody started their business with that planning towards such a situation. So, but you also have like a fallback plan and say, okay, what if anything should happen to drop our revenue by 80%? What do we do? First of all, you need to analyze it. That's why you need a team. That's why it's very important for businesses to have an R&D team. Very important, so that they will be able to sit and analyze situations as they come and analyze signs as they come. So your planning should be straightforward towards what happens when we get to this situation. If we're getting to this situation, how do we handle it in terms of volatility, and how do we manage our portfolio? How do we handle it? Have a treasury team that manage our portfolio across currencies? How do we save ourselves from volatility? How do we move from one currency to another in terms of saving ourselves and also making money from the game plan? So you need to understand that, and you need to understand the type of business. Are you making, is your money coming in foreign currencies? Is it coming in FX? Is it coming in naira? Is it going out in FX? Is it going out in naira? So these are like the things you need to consider in building that particular plan for such situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that one. We have, I think, 2 more questions, but this time around, I'm just going to point 1 or 2 persons to react to the questions because of our time, and so we can wrap up very quickly. So, Rena, I need your input here on number 2. The second question from the comment section, if you can display, what's one expense category startups consistently underestimate, and should startups prioritize profits over growth? So 2 questions in one. Probably just touch very quickly on them. Yeah.
Okay, one expense would be people, right? I think Doc mentioned it earlier. Where you look at your process and you keep scaling, are you going to keep hiring people? So what can you automate? Almost building efficiency so that you can almost justify without a reasonable doubt the reason why you are hiring. Because you might say, oh, this is person's salary, but what is the cost of training, the cost of recruitment, onboarding, all of that, right? It's something that we don't fully appreciate and needs to look at. And then, should we prioritize profit or growth? I can't say one or the other. I'd say let's focus on sustainable growth, because there's sometimes you need to make a loss if you are trying to, for instance, expand or gain market share. As long as you are clear about your goals, if you are clear about your goals and how that ultimately making that short-term decision to almost go into a loss position, or for lack of a better word, for the growth, long-term growth, without obviously putting the company at risk. There's always the tension between I want to scale versus I want to be profitable, and you need to make intelligent decisions at every point. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was spot on. I think the answer is clear from what Rena has said. The next question I would direct to Doctor. I think we had talked on this earlier, probably before now, but let's take it again. At what stage should a startup prioritize profitability over rapid growth? I think this is something similar to what Rene has just responded to. And how can founders determine the right balance? So, Doctor, touch on the balance in this case.
Just focus on the 2 from the 1. That's the balance. Focus on the 2 from the 1. So, and I don't think I think the mistake is that we had looked at it. I mean quite a number of persons who want to raise money from investors, have looked at it, that it's either growth or profitability. You can actually pursue both, right? If you get to unit economics right, you can actually determine your profitability with your product, particularly when you've already achieved product market fit. The moment you've gotten that right, it means you already know you can make profit. What then stops you from growing that? That's growth. So focus on growth That's how real businesses actually operate. That's how traditional businesses operate. That's how smart tech companies operate. They are not mutually exclusive, right? Meaning that we can actually pursue both. We can achieve profitability. Of course, at the early days, you might still be trying to figure out what the product market fit is. But once you figure that out and get your unit economics right, then you can decipher, profitability at that point, at that micro level. Then what you should be doubling on now is growth. In fact, at that point, I encourage you to raise funds to achieve the growth.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much, Doctor. Ike, do you have anything to add on this particular question? Oh, I think he's frozen. He's frozen there. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking our time to be with us. These questions were actually very interesting, and the responses as well. The panelists have done justice to the topic of today. So the long and short of the story is, to stay in the game, it's a marathon, right? Building a startup is a marathon, right? And then to stay in the game, you must reduce your spend. And then to reduce your spend, you must actually know what is important to the business at different stages of the business, right? And we've come to conclusion that until you know these numbers, you're not able to sustain, your business and actually even scale the business. With that out of the way, permit me to do a little marketing, right, to my audience, right? So, this was put together by Quora, and Quora is the one-stop shop payment infrastructure built across, built to service our customers across all of Africa. And what we do is we power collections, payouts, and settlements, for our customers, for their customers in whatever market that they operate. So do well to check us out on our website, corahq.com, and then reach out to us as well from any of our social media platforms, as well as through the sales email, if you need to check in with us to do any forms of business. With that in mind, thank you so much for keeping it a date with us. I think I'll just allow the panelists to give me one word of advice for a startup founder that they are mentoring. So assuming you are mentoring me, you gave me $2 million and you don't want me to blow it, please give me one word of advice before you go. So let me start
Know
with
your numbers. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Reina. Thank you. I'll take note of my numbers. IK, please go ahead.
Growth is relative. Grow in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Growth is relative. Grow in the right direction. And again, last but not the least, Doctor, please go ahead.
Know thyself.
Man, know thyself. So I should not buy that Lambo anymore.
Why would you?
Just know that you already know yourself. So based on what you know about yourself, make the right decision. Know thyself.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. With that, we've come to the end of this particular episode of the Quora webinar. Till we come your way next time, thank you so much for hanging with us. And thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Dr. Steve and Ike Chuko.